Hello and welcome back to the Patient First Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bryan Laskin. And as always, I'm happy that you're here and I'm excited. We have a great guest today, somebody that I've known for probably close to a decade, Nancy Lashley, who is just a phenomenal marketing mind in dentistry. So Nancy, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
I'm so excited to jump back in with you and see what's going on, what you've been up to, and what I've missed. And most importantly, getting back to what's most important, which is dentistry and changing lives with dentistry.
Because you've done a lot in marketing and dentistry. So,
Yeah.
and we were talking a little bit before the podcast about you do a lot of different things. So it's hard to even conceptualize and put into words. But the way I would say it, and then you can, so I don't set you up to try to set you up to put in context what you do. I think of two very crucial roles that I've seen you play in, like when we've worked together at Opera DDS and then with other people. One is a connector. You're a phenomenal connector of human to human, like finding out the people to that can work well together. And number two, getting and helping people amplify their authenticity in their marketing, which I'm a firm believer that the right kind of marketing attracts people and repels people, which means focusing on what makes you or your company authentically you. Would you feel
Yes.
that's your strength and how you apply what you do to marketing?
Yes. And I would say it's been that way since I started without me necessarily realizing what I was doing or how different it was from where most marketing generally and also in dentistry has gone. So, to give a little background, I come from the world of dental consultants. I was raised by dental consultants when that wasn't a thing, like in the 90s. And I fell in love, kind of being the kid behind the scenes, doing stuff. I taught myself, well, they had me learn how to do graphic design on the computer because they didn't want to hire a real one. But it turned out that my nerdiness, my tech savvy, and especially my artistic abilities all coincided. Being able to translate to the marketing back when it was going from like a drawing board to computerized, anything and everything necessary in order to translate a message from an entity to a marketplace, to the marketplace mostly suited to that entity. And this world is dentistry. And I was also raised to change the world. And so my little pea brain, I thought, okay, all humans hopefully have teeth or should. And so if I can work in dentistry, and again, as the kid behind the scenes, I was working at the highest echelon of dentistry at that time. This is around 2000 at this point, the year 2000. And if I can work with the best of the best, then that sort of has a trickle down where I can help elevate what dentistry can do, worldwide. So through that process, I found myself, my home became the American Academy of Cosmetic Dentistry. And this is in the early 2000s when cosmetic dentistry was becoming a real science, not just an art, but actually some science behind it. It's when they created their accreditation process. And so I took my laptop and my business suit and I created my own booth and spent all my money to go to their trade show or their meeting, stay at the Motel 6 because I couldn't afford to stay at the fancy hotel. And I was my own booth babe. I was 25 years old and there was no such thing as dental marketing at the time. There really wasn't. There was me. There was one website company, some people may remember back in the day, just started called Einstein. And then two other sort of guys who did it had done it maybe through the 90s period. So there was no dental marketing industry. Now, as 25 years later, I go to a show and walk the floor and I have these kids who weren't even born yet, God bless them, jumping at me because eventually I became a dental wife, the wife of a dental office, asking if I had marketing, if I, had SEO, if I had a website, and especially lately about patient testimonials, which I always thought was pretty funny because, again, when I started, there was nothing out there. But from the beginning, my very first study club, I wrote this thing I called the Athena's 10 Points of Light. My company, I called myself Athena. She was my alter ego, the goddess Athena, because she was born fully formed from the head of Zeus and the goddess of wisdom and arts and crafts. And I thought that was appropriate. So I wrote this thing called the Athena's 10 Points of Light when I was 25, and it still stands true today. I was just looking at it the other day, and I realized that it is all based on authenticity and how you decide who you are, what you're about. And then you go into the process of creating all the elements that you need to transcend that, like the logo, its hardline colors, that sort of thing, all of the materials, media that you need in order to create something like, for example, the screen behind you that has a beautiful logo, right? That is so you. I didn't make that, but I would have made that for you. Translate that so that it is consistent and repetitive through everything that you do. So that when we see that, those of us who know and love you, we know, oh, there's Bryan, right? So that if that were separate from you as yourself and I found it somewhere, I would know that's you, right? That's Bryan. So it's authentic to who you are, what you're about, and you're able to then attract the tree. I didn't realize that I was going from this just instinctively. And that's how I ended up working with all of my clients. I worked with probably 1,000 practices, tons and tons of corporations, tons of labs, eventually even like DSO type labs, organizations, professional organizations. And then eventually I ended up marrying one of y'all. One of you guys. So I had this track record and philosophy about the point of marketing, as you said, is to condense in your own sense of self who you are and what you're about, create the tools necessary to replicate that without you having to be there so that if it's something far out from you, like a radio ad, for example, or it's your front door, it's sending the same message consistent and repetitively so that the client or the patient finding their way to you does not lose trust in what the experience is going to be like once they enter that door. And here I'm talking about mostly dental offices, of course. Most people don't want to enter a dental office. And so what they want to do is have any excuse at any time to lose their trust in whether they belong with you or not. And this is a new thought for, or at least it has been in my experience, a new thought for a lot of dentists to think about that not everybody is meant to walk in that door because you as the dentist, while you're delivering a product or rather a service and a restored smile, it's your own self and the experience that you create and the way that you deliver that service that makes that client or that patient want to come back to you. So I had this theory and it worked really well for my clients. And then I ended up having to create my own practice as a build up from scratch, not a single chart, started with 0 charts, 0 money. So I had 0 marketing budget here in my hometown in Eugene, Oregon. And it was just up to me and all of my chutzpah and all of my big ideas and putting them to the test, like boots on the ground, quite literally. And on my own, within 2 years, we went from 0 to 1 million in production of absolutely raving fan patients. And it came back to that I was implementing my own ideas about how things should be done in the dental world, which is to be really clear about who we were as a dental practice, what we were providing to people in our community, and making sure that they found their way to us as easily as possible. And that by the time they got to the back and actually had the service delivered and then were checking out with me, they were raving fans such that we had about 1,000, 100% 5-star reviews, none of which I ever asked for. I never used a service that followed up asking for it. That became part of my marketing was we have a 100% 5-star review and not a single one has been solicited. Every single one. And what was important about that wasn't the amount of chatter in our town about the area's about 250,000. It was that it was on all platforms. For example, I might post something on Facebook and clients would jump in and I call them clients because to me they're clients. They would jump in and I would have 3 or 4 on one of my postings for the dental practice. Oh my gosh, this is amazing. Blah, blah, blah. Very authentic to that client's experience. Very clearly representative of them as a human being, having had an experience with us. And that then translated back and then attracted more clients that were ready to have that experience. And they came back. And so it became and Cicely is a constant loop, a machine really. I didn't ever worry about getting new clients. They came all the time and they came ready to have the experience that they knew they were going to have with us and that we consistently, repetitively delivered every single time. Now, about 4 years ago, because both my kids ended up being special needs, very totally another subject, I had to leave the practice. And one night we just decided I needed to be a stay at home and help keep one kid out of mental hospitals and the other one get him out of bed and physically active again. And what happened was those 5-star reviews stopped. It's not that we got 4, 3, 2. They just stopped. And what I realized was it was because I been holding down that ship and creating that experience and creating the marketing messaging and delivering it consistently and repetitively that I, just like I knew you guys, all of you dentists are, I was marketing myself authentically. And when you remove me from the situation, from the practice, even though they were still providing the same service and the same care, the chatter stopped. which to me reinforced everything I had already always known to be true, which is that the best marketing is almost effortless. It should be effortless. It should just be who you are, what you're about, consistent repetitively to the point where you're sick of it, but your marketplace loves it. So it is hard to define what I do.
No, brought it. Yeah, I think, you said a lot of great things in there. And I want to go back to a couple different things. Number one, 25 years ago, there weren't really marketing companies in dentistry. There are now. I think that it's funny because you said you were raised by consultants. And I always say, after dental insurance companies, the two biggest charlatans in dentistry are consultants and marketing companies. And I would say, because most marketing companies are focused on how many people can you come and get to call the practice or come in the front door, and you completely ignore the
Waste your
experience of the
time.
patients, right? Yeah, and what you're talking about is completely the opposite. What How do we elevate the internal patient experience so that we gain referrals, which is how you should grow any practice. Everybody knows, but it's hard to just write a check and have that happen. However, if you write a check and you get people in the front door, that's why the marketing companies go through so much churn in dentistry too. And the only people that I know that are talking about authenticity in marketing in dentistry tend to be talking about it like from a social media perspective, which like if you're relying on your social media presence to grow your practice, you've already lost. No, I think social media is part of a much broader strategy, but the rubber meets the road when when there's a handpiece whining and blood and spit flying around the dental practice, right? Um, so maybe I'll pause there before I go to the next. A, do you agree with that? And B, for the for people that are listening, not just because you work more with that, you've worked with a lot of dental practices, but you work with a lot of companies that in dentistry too, to help them, I would say establish a brand presence, focus, strategy, mission, vision, values. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Absolutely. So to answer your question about social media, the way I think about it is not the way that you guys are hearing about it when you're on a meeting show floor and the kids are pulling you aside and trying to tell you it needs to be this, needs to be that. Social media, when done right, in my case, for example, the clients that were coming to the practice were going on to social media in some of the cases to create referrals to talk about their experiences. And so that was very important. But the important thing is that so here's the thing, I would test engagement. So you test engagement with a post. Okay, who's my audience that I'm posting this to? What's the engagement, right? What are we looking for? And I wish I had, I wish I had the data, but not 100 times the engagement on my posts because I was posting authentically to the authentic audience that already wanted to hear that message. And so, like I said, it was a sort of an infinite feedback loop of this right people then referring their friends using social media. So you can use it as a tool, but to consider social media as being the end all be all that's going to get your butts in the chairs, basically, is the same as 5 years ago it was SEO. And 5 years before that, it was your website. What's the new shiny thing? It's not about that. It's about what tools work for you. Does social media work for a particular practice? If it does, great. What's the engagement? As in a little aside, when I used to speak about marketing, I talked about how I found my first husband, he's like my twin brother. He's one of my best friends in the whole world. We all actually look identical. We're both giant white people. But I would talk about just real quick that this was in 2001. I was down in Southern California. I was 25. I was single. That I'm 6'2" and looked like a Barbie. I went on to Match.com. It was brand new, and I got like a free 3-day weekend. And I did a post. And what I didn't post about was I like Chardonnay and walks on the beach and going hiking and all this like really blah, blah, blah stuff. I did a very Athena post about who I was and what I was about. Chose a couple of very appropriate photos. And I put that up. And of course, I had the fake email address that everybody should have when you do this to get your responses back in the day. We didn't have chat. And I got, back then, Match would tell you, okay, you got so many views of your profile. So in the 3 days, it was 4,000 views of my profile, generally, roughly 4,000. My fake email inbox got about roughly 400 emails. It was like 385 emails. But here's what I would say to people, and this is like mind blowing to a lot of people, which was I didn't go on 385 dates. Of that, only 4 did I consider worth connecting with. of that one was Peter. The first email with him, he didn't send a picture. First email, I'm like, this is the one. Send me a picture. How cute are you? Turns out he's cute as button. And I was like, okay. And that was it. And we were married for over 10 years and have a kid together and we're still best friends. So that to me is a great example of what marketing should be. If you're getting social media and you're getting low engagement, but they're pushing it so much because you're writing the check to push it so much, you get wider reach, but you get such low engagement and the people come in and they don't know what to expect and you're wasting their time. You're wasting your time. You're wasting everybody's time when you can condense your messaging into whatever medium it is that you're going to use, whether it's social media or something else, going to, I don't know, the Elks Lodge, that's a method too, right? It doesn't matter what it is, but condensing your message such that you're putting forth authentically who you are, what you're about, who the people are that you're most going to benefit, and making sure they know each touch point on their way into your front door to the back to the chair that you're going to deliver on your promise, the better for everyone. Nobody's time is wasted. And then again, it becomes a feedback because you don't really have to even worry about it, as long as you're staying in your authenticity. So that's a very long answer to your quick question about social media. Your second was you were asking if I worked with all kinds of people in dentistry. I do want to say one thing real quick because I'm really excited about it. I mentioned that the American Academy of Cosmetic Dentistry was my home, and it really has been this whole time. Super excited to say that as a dental wife, I got invited to be on the leadership, and I was on their board of trustees, which runs their charitable foundation, Give Back a Smile, which restores the smiles of survivors of domestic violence and sex trafficking. And not only were we a volunteer office, but I got to be on that board for 6 years. And I'm the only non-dentist, non-dental tech, non-anybody person with no letters after my name to get to have that honor. And I also earned one of the EB awards for humanitarian work in 2018. Again, the first person ever who's not a dentist and not a dental tech to get their name on one of their awards. So my love of dentistry runs completely through me because changes that we can make when we know, let's say, why do we open the door in the morning? Like when we know what is our why do we go to that door every single morning? Like, why do you show up every morning at your various projects and turn the key and go on again? Why do we do it? What's our why? And it's because we know that we can change lives, right? As long as we're not wasting
Oh,
our
yeah.
time, we're there.
Well, so the last thing I wanted to ask you about was the kind of how you grew your practice through 100% positive reviews. And when you left, basically they stopped. Because I want what I want to highlight and get your perspective on is that a lot of people talk about leadership, and I think that term gets thrown around a lot. And I think of leadership as somebody who comes up with a vision and bangs the drum, like it gets everybody consistently doing something and towards a vision. And I don't think that gets talked enough about when it comes to market. That somebody in the practice needs to be I think of if you're thinking of a dog sled, like the lead dog who sets the pace for everybody else. And if you're listening to this podcast, it's probably you, right? Let's face it. And if you're not doing it, nobody's doing it. Could you talk a little bit about leadership when it comes to marketing within a dental practice?
Yeah. I think the mistake that I made in our dental practice was that it did turn out to be so about me being that lead dog. And when you take out a lead dog, either the dogs have no leader or you throw in a new lead. That's a new marketing message, right? That's a new experience that people are going to have. Because when we're talking about a dental practice, even if it's a giant practice or if it's a small fee for service, high end cosmetic, it's the people at the front desk, it's the entire team, it's the experience that everybody creates for people coming in the door, all the way through to the service being delivered by the dentist or the hygienist. And if you switch out, so if you're smart enough to create a marketing machine that is, again, the essence of who you are and what you're about and is its own feedback loop so that you just get an emotion, you don't have to worry about it. That works great. But when you remove that lead dog, transitioning to a new, so like we're doing that right now with the practice. Like, how do we transition the messaging so that it continues to provide the service that is being promised without losing the momentum that you've invested in to that point? Because people come and go. People don't come and go. Or you get to a point where you transition out of your practice. Let's say you're ready to retire. How do you transition that to an associate? And that's something I've done many times too. So we're in that process right now. I'm not sure I'm explaining. I think leadership comes and leadership goes. One thing I think about is I used to work with clients on what they wore, like when they went to Costco on the weekends or when they went to church or what have you, because it mattered, right? If your patients see you in the milk aisle and you're in sweats and flip flops, that matters, right? Everywhere you go, if you're not being if you're not being aware that you are marketing yourself, you're losing that momentum as a leader of your practice or your entity. One thing, I don't know why it makes me think of this, but when COVID hit, so I think what I'm thinking about is the pivot. So if something changes, leadership changes, your available services change, and so you have a new 3D printer, whatever it is, new thing, when there's a change to the experience that you're providing, is to account for that. And I'm thinking about what I did when COVID hit. So we were a brand new practice. We'd only been really running for a couple of years and didn't know how we might survive if we had to, honest to God, shut down for 6 weeks or a couple months, whatever that ended up being. So what I did was I got quiet instead of letting my fear eat or my take over. I got quiet. I felt the energy. I think this was Friday, the 13th of March, 2020. I remember that afternoon. We were actually open that day. I was like, I just felt it. I felt the zeitgeist switch. I knew what was coming. And I thought, okay, how am I going to reframe who we are and what we're about to get through this? Right. Because it was going to be shut down except for emergency essential services. So I came home with my laptop and very quickly created the content that I needed and got it out. That luckily for, in our case, I was able to see, okay, my husband, like when my husband, John, happens to be an old school dentist who can do all the things, right? He can do the oral surgery that is an emergency. Like that needs to be dealt. You can't deal with teeth need to be extracted, whether we're in quarantine or not. So I was able to very quickly pivot as that lead dog and make it so that we were available under guidelines. We're meeting all the guidelines that were necessary, but also providing a very needed service in our community. And I was able to package that, market that, get that out immediately. And we ended up doing higher production in April 2020 than we did in April 19th, which is not how it normally goes for seasonal. But it's on the one hand, yes, I was the leader of the practice, but on the other hand, I was looking at it from that 10,000 foot view of where are we in the community? What services do we provide? How can we accommodate the changes and make it so that we're able to still provide consistently and repetitively the experience that we are promising the community? And then when I left the practice, I did not do that. And that's to my detriment that I didn't, and it was not for not caring. It was because that feedback loop was still working. We were still getting all of the referrals from our clients, but I was just dove headfirst into kids. And that was, that's a big change. And so I didn't spend a lot of time reworking the marketing in a way that I should have, but we're doing that now. But I think people need to be, you all need to be clear and aware again, who you are, what you're about. And then as things change, as you evolve, as the services and technology and the potentials evolve, as the community evolves, how do you adjust your own growth to the growth of the industry and the world around us? And we all have to do that. And I hope you're all doing that. If we're listening to your podcast, certainly we're doing that, right? How do we stay ahead of ourselves? That is the way to make it through whatever comes our way. So it's not about the new shiny gadget to me. It's about how can I utilize what's around me authentically to deliver what is important to me, and whether that's beautiful patient care or new technology to the dental world, whatever it might be, a great lab service, whatever it is. That to me is true leadership.
Yeah, I think at the end of it, the really marketing in dentistry comes down to how we're treating our patients and our team members. And
How you're treating yourselves, your own
it's
self.
true.
Starts there. That's what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Nancy, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Very much appreciated. We will post when we post the podcast, we'll put a link to your website. So people who want to have more information, figure out how they can level up their marketing, definitely reach out to Nancy. She's was instrumental in getting Opera DDS's brand and message and going, which led to going on and doing big things. So anybody that's listening, I would definitely recommend reach out to Nancy and have her help you out. So thanks again, Nancy.